Hi.
Welcome to Seattle Network. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing with your time to tell about your story, your experiences. I mean, you freaking transformed the whole entire gaming industry through Microsoft. You're like OG Microsoft. And I want you to talk through that. I kind of see you as a gladiator, a titan. You've been here in Seattle for a really long time. Yes, you've kind of been around and stuff like that, but you've led a lot of products. I just want to list off just a few, the things that you've done. But you have, from the products you've led, and everyone who is listening, you can look on the post. You can look at all this again and go to Craig's LinkedIn or Seattle profile, and you hear all about him. But he started at Wacom, Windows development tools. There's Microsoft. He literally is the guy behind DirectX. So he is the guy of Windows Media. Then he went to the startup world with Action Engine, CEO and co-founder there, one of the first smartphone client server platforms. Then he went on to his journey in AOL, Time Warner, all of their mobile efforts. That was huge. And then going to the media side of it, and then back to Microsoft, where, you love Microsoft. So Microsoft and Microsoft loves you. Mac Office, so Office for Mac, entertainment clients business, Xbox Live for Xbox One launch, which I'm so excited to talk to you about. Windows 10, the inbox apps, and the omnichannel efforts. Then you went to the startup world again for, like you would say, is a 7-year buffet. And just to... and we talk a lot about that because you just can't get rid of the startupness, No. You just love it so much.
Yeah.
And then Amazon, you led all of the App Store customer experience team, third-party App Store business policy and compliance, and now you're on Wolf Doodle Software that you founded, doing a mobile game company, and all to say, you're truly a technical founder. And there's this quote that you said in an interview some hot years ago. You said, coding for elegance is something you do in university. Coding for speed is what you do in the real world. Welcome, Craig, to the arena again and again and again.
After that introduction, it's kind of hard to follow. It's kind of hard to follow that. It's like all I can do is disappoint people now. I should take a bow and leave.
Live stream is now over.
Exactly, that's it.
Look, the 3 things that we need to talk about today for this open room, and it's truly a mentorship session. I believe this is a huge masterclass because there's a lot of people who's on my network, who's on your network, who are corporate executives, they're investors, they're entrepreneurs themselves, world-class operators, engineers who really look up to you, and also the whole entire gaming industry, honestly, of what you have impacted and transformed it. It's not just, Microsoft and Xbox. It's all the others too that have, been poached around and went from one ship to another. You've really transformed the industry. So the 3 areas of conversations I wanted to talk to, and we'll go through in that route, is 1, I would love for you to talk through about coding DirectX because, oh my God, that's incredible, 1. And then 2 would be how the heck did you fundraise $35 million during a downturn, an economic downturn, because that is like, as a CEO and co-founder too. You weren't a CTO, you're a CEO. So technical founder to CEO position. And then 3rd, this is the secret sauce I feel like you have, is that your strength, not only going from 0 to 1, from building something from literally the first line of code, but you really scale through people in huge organizations. Your sweet spot is 80 to 200, but really you've done it all from 0 to 500. And so I'm so excited to hear about how you led, your leadership principles, how you've been able to do it, not just at business, but at home too. You're kind of nuts. I think that's how you and I met. Let's just be real. And big credits to your wife who brought us together. And she's like, crazy meet crazy. You guys are on a rocket ship together. So let's start with DirectX. What is the context that people have to know about you, Craig, in basically being an OG Microsoft, being at that era and time? Because you're literally living history. So please, help me understand, and everyone too, some context before going into the actual, proper parts of the, coding and the technical side of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a little bit of context is that will give some insight into my approach and personality, at least in that era in particular. So before I came to Microsoft, I'm Canadian. So I went to the University of Waterloo in Southern Ontario near Toronto. I ended up working for a small company literally right next to the university, working on all their Windows tools. And I was asked to, but I didn't start doing their Windows tools. I was asked to make a DOS-based application, because yes, it was the beginning of the '90s. Work on Windows through some middleware layer, and so I was like trying to fight here I am. I had a brand new job, fighting my boss, going, "This is a terrible idea. You can't make things look good." Wouldn't listen. He said, "No, you have to do it." So I remember over a Christmas break, I was looking for any excuse to not work on the thing he wanted. And so, like, on Windows, there was no debug. We had no debugger for Windows. You couldn't debug your code. So I'm like, well, first thing I should do is build the debugger, right? So thank God I don't have to work on this stupid idea. And then as I was doing my research, I remember over the Christmas break, and it's funny because when we talk about DirectX, it was also a Christmas moment. But I found this appendix that showed you how to make 32-bit, how to get access to 32-bit memory, even though that was a 16-bit era where it's literally 65K kilobytes, right? I mean, no one today even, like, you can't even think, yeah, the bitmaps and a bitmap on your website's bigger than that. But this was an era where, it was really hard to build these big applications, databases and spreadsheets and all these things. And so I'm like, I wonder if I could take that and make something that let 32-bit apps run on Windows. So I did that over the break, came back, showed the CEO of the company, it was a small company, 35 people, right? But I went to him, look, and I showed him like one Windows app running. And so he said, stop doing this other thing, go do that instead. And so that's what I worked on for the next 2.5, 3 years, is basically building out and expanding their Windows tools. In the process of, so I had a bit of an attitude problem. It's like, I don't want to do the dumb thing. I want to do something that can make a difference. And we got Lotus and IBM and Foxborough that Microsoft bought, and we had this long laundry list of big companies, which for our little dinky Canadian Waterloo company was a big deal. And so that was like, yes, that was awesome. Anyway, along the way of doing that, Microsoft got super interested in what we were doing. I ended up meeting with a bunch of folks, and along the way they poached me. So in 93,
yeah, they had their eyes on you.
Yeah, in 93 I went to Microsoft and I worked in a technical marketing team, because they were looking for developers with personalities, engineers with personalities, which was always challenging, I think, but particularly challenging back then. It was all nerds all the time. Sorry. So whilst doing that,
yeah.
I did. By the way, I was responsible in particular for the development tools evangelism. So I had to work with the companies. Like, there was a bunch of companies that did development tools back then. Now there's like open source and Microsoft basically.
Yeah.
But back then there was a whole bunch of people that did compilers, and so because I had the background, I was working with those companies. It was a horrible job because Microsoft had tools too. So everyone thought I was the representative not only of the evil empire, but the evil empire that was out to get them. So it was not a lot of fun. So, but a year later,
Craig's coming.
There was this Windows 95 project coming, codenamed Chicago. It didn't have a name yet, and there was an evangelism position to try to evangelize game companies to come to Windows. Now, that was also a miserable job because games on Windows were these multimedia bits of nonsense, right? They were not games as we would think of games.
Yeah, you want to throw the computer, like you literally want to take a hammer to your computer because it wasn't,
You could. So DOS
cooperating.
was where all the games were at the time. But Microsoft wanted everyone to come to Windows, and so this was the point of this evangelism position. So I applied for it. I got beat out by a good friend of mine. He got the job.
Oh boy.
So instead, I'm like, okay, well, F you. I'll go see if I can work on the code instead. I didn't know what it was going to look like. I just took it. So I talked to the multimedia team on Windows 95 because it was all called multimedia back then. And I was brought in to work on this Intel project. Funny side note, that Intel project got Microsoft sued by Apple, who wanted to. How I met Bill Gates was actually I was called into this meeting because what I was working on was the thing that Apple was pointing to, that we stole QuickTime, which was their multimedia tech. Microsoft stole QuickTime was the headline. And so, now we hadn't. Turned out Intel had hired a contractor who wrote a little bit of code for Apple to run a driver for a graphics card. They did the same thing for us. So it was a nonsense lawsuit. But I remember leaning over to because I wanted to work on real stuff for games. The management there was a hard no because they concluded because there were no games on Windows that no one wanted to play games on Windows. It was this interesting circular argument of like, so, yes, but they don't want to play games on Windows because the games are terrible. And so...
Did your personality really drive through these war room conversations, Craig?
I kind of skipped ahead because actually what happened is I got this job and I had this idea. So here was the state of the art. There was a bunch of people making graphics cards. They were all different. So if you were a developer, you literally couldn't. There was ATI and S3 and Cirrus and NVIDIA, and NVIDIA was like a tiny little company back then.
Yeah.
Not the powerhouse they were there. There's this little tiny company, and forget it, right? You couldn't. None of your features could be shown. And so my idea was, well, what if I made it possible? I looked across all these graphics cards. I looked at what the capabilities were and went, I think it's possible to write a layer that would give developers access to this capability in a generic enough way that you could like be S3, you could be ATI, you could be Cirrus, you could be whoever, and yet the developer could access more advanced capabilities. So that was like the thought. So over Christmas, this is another Christmas, over Christmas, the first lines of code for DirectX were written Christmas Eve 1994. And we launched DirectX 1 in September of 1995. And basically, I was convicted. Part of what, if you're, wherever you're founding something, if it's in a little dinky company, if it's in, Microsoft was like 12,000 people, so compared to how it is now, it was a dinky, big company.
Just dinky,
but it's a
Craig.
big company. I mean, it was a big company, relative to what I was used to, 35 people, you know. But it's having the conviction of you, like, having the conviction of your beliefs is so important, and the naysayers, because believe me, it was all naysayers around didn't have a name yet. It was just there was naysayers around making games for Windows, and so I went off and started writing code because just like it's the Whatcom story. That's why the Whatcom context was interesting because I was like, I know what I'll do. I remember I have a pattern for this now. One time is a pattern. I will go work on the code and I will see what I can do. And by February, and so I had this I recruited another friend of mine. So I was working with the developer evangelist. He was talking to the game companies. I brought in a friend of mine to be the program manager, and his job was to make everyone ignore me. So I went and hid there was this building called Building 20. It's where the porting lab was, where we brought developers in to we would help them get stuff onto 32-bit Windows, Windows NT, Windows 95. And so I hid in the porting lab. We brought in kind of half a dozen hardware companies. The evangelist, a guy named Alex St. John, the evangelist, managed to get id to give us the software to Doom, which is one of the OG first-person shooters. And so basically I had this playground of hardware companies. So I'd ask them what, I would keep iterating on the APIs and asking them if they thought they were good or not. And I built their drivers for them because I had to invent a new driver model for doing this, for making the graphics cards work on Windows in this new way where you got access. And so because it was so direct compared to how everything else was working, we called Direct Draw, Direct Sound for audio, Direct Input for joysticks and joysticks mostly. Controllers came later. Direct Play for networking, for basically having lobbies to play, all that stuff. And so in April of '95, we launched it at the Game Developer Conference way back in 1990 spring of '95, April. And in InfoWorld, I don't think they're around anymore, but it was a tech journal, and they made fun of us, right? Direct Draw, Direct Play, Direct Sound. They called it DirectX. They were insulting us. I went, oh! That's a great thing.
Wait, hold on. But Craig, that's the thing. There's 2 points here. Hold on, let's take a pause real quick, because the talking about what you've been building, right? And someone's reaction, whether that's in media or something like that, that's usually kind of the best thing of like, oh, that's how they remembered it, or that's how they mirrored it back to you in that way.
Yeah.
And you being the one who's really open-minded and saying, wait, if that's how they thought about it, that's it. Which someone else could, if you were different, someone else could very much be like, why the heck are they saying it this way? No, it's this way, kind of thing. But that's the turning point of product market fit.
Yeah.
That I just want to illustrate this. It's never how you want it to go, but when people start getting on the bandwagon and they're saying their way, oh my God, it's actually the best thing ever. And then the other thing I need to really, really highlight here is when you're talking about all the different graphic cards and how the developers were like, oh my gosh, I can't do anything. That was when you not only identified the problem, that's when you really understood the business. And that is what everyone's trying to have in their pitch deck. That's what everyone's trying to have in that clarifying elevator pitch moment. Now, in retrospect, going, through the years of that. But that is what you were able to solve. And hence why from Christmas to all the way to September of the launch, it was go time.
It was go time. It was definitely go time. And it was interesting. It was where everything pivoted. It was right at the Game Developer Conference, which we went to without actual permission, Alex and Eric and I, and we demoed. I had working on an ATI graphics card. ATI is now owned by AMD. They're one of the few that are still kind of a brand. They're one of the only brands that are still around anymore. Anyway, I had that. I had this little source code to a part of a game called Super Bubsy. It was a 2D side scrollers, multiple layers that move at different speeds, gives you the perception of motion. Anyway, and I had it so I had it running on Windows 95, and it was running at 60 frames a second, full screen, right? Never seen before on Windows. That's when the VP that ran Windows 95, when I showed it to him, he was like, oh, you should do that. It's kind of like Wacom all over again. It's, oh, you should do that. And so that was where things really unlocked, so I could start hiring people. And it's funny because it was also organic. See, I never intended to build an organization. I wanted to build this product, right? And for me, I'm always just kind of like, what's the next thing I need to do to make this work? And if I happen to have done it before, I can draw on patterns, which is why as I've gone through my career, I can start solving bigger problems faster because I have more kind of experience to draw on. But in the DirectX world, it was like, well, I need to do audio. And a friend of mine from high school, of all things, he and I went to Waterloo at the same time. He ended up at Microsoft before me, and he was working on audio. So I cajoled him into working on Direct Sound, and then I needed one person to help me with the Direct Draw, which was all the graphical stuff, because this was pre-Direct 3D. 3D came in DirectX 3. And so I'm like, I went to my boss, can I hire one person? So I found a guy, right? And then it was and then one more, well, I need one more person. Fast forward to DirectX 5, I had 100 engineers working for me. And I'm like, how did that happen? Right? I didn't want that. I did not want it. I didn't want it. Right? It was just. I remember kind of going at one point, going, how come I'm not getting to write code anymore? Right? What happened? Like, what happened? I used to love. I'm not writing code. Instead, I'm like constantly being interrupted by people who are working on code. And so it was an interesting journey, because it was. And if I was to, like, retrospect, right, like I said, it's the same thing at Wacom with that Windows extender, DirectX. There'll be more examples as we walk forward in time. But it was that having that conviction of being right. And not so arrogant to think that it's, like you said about the whole kind of why we ended up calling DirectX. We were originally calling it the Game SDK, which, by the way, totally boring. Because with DirectX, you got the DirectX box, shortened to Xbox.
But back then, SDK was the normal jargon anyways.
Yeah, it was the normal jargon back then, but it wasn't a customer-facing thing.
No.
It was really DirectX, but somehow it became a thing. I actually don't know at what point that became that nerd term became a kind of more common vernacular, but it did. But it was having the courage of conviction and the willingness to do whatever, right? Like there was no job beneath me, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I made coffee, sometimes I made popcorn, sometimes I helped other people debug shit. Like part of it too is like, and we'll talk about this in startup world in particular. It's like there isn't a thing I won't do, right? If it needs to be done, and I think that sets an example to others around you, because then you build this culture of like, okay, well, if it needs to be done, we'll do it, right? And so DirectX was very much that of like, well, if people don't want me working on it, I'll hide and do. That has a mixed bag way. That could have got me fired. So just to be clear, both times I did that in my early career. There's probably alternate universes where I got fired for doing that, right? Because I was basically going against. Not just going against the grain, but directly going against what I was being asked to do. But I saw something bigger, right?
I think you also had people who protected you too.
Well, yeah, definitely it was helpful to have people back. So Microsoft was small back then, but we had offices in building 4. I think we were in building 4. Back when there were only, 25 buildings. And so my evangelist friend and my program manager friend were there, and I was like, "Oh, Craig's doing stuff, he's doing stuff." Meanwhile, meanwhile in the secret spot, and the best part was Doom. I gotta say, Doom was my favorite because bringing Doom up on DirectX, so bringing up on the audio system and the graphics system and then the networking system. Well, then you had to test DirectX. You got to play Doom. Right? Which back then it's kind of like getting to play Call of Duty now, right? It was the Call of Duty of the era. And now, I've seen Doom running in browsers, Doom's running on watches. Doom was not very sophisticated code compared to today's code, but back then it was like
no, but it was fun. It was really fun, and for you to be able to see that you can actually. Your code worked in a way that you were able to access it in a fun way. That's a whole
Oh, it was it's one of the things that I'm a big believer in is, and in corporate I really didn't see there's a shocking lack of this, and that is use the product, live the product, breathe the product, use the product, right? If you don't want to use the product, why are you working on it? And yet, if you look at how buggy and problematic products are in the software world, at least, is because people, they don't use them. I've seen it everywhere. It wasn't just Microsoft. I saw it at Time Warner. I saw it at Amazon, right? Where so many people just aren't using it, right? It's like, why?
Yeah.
Because it's a job, right? People just get a job. It's a job. It's like, Jesus.
But even that, even talking about Microsoft, right? So when, and the reason why we connected so well is because I've worked on almost every line of business of Microsoft when I started my career. And so it's kind of like my fundamentals. And I can relate with that in a way because it's hard I had to learn that I had to do so much I guess like product development in a way, and work together with the Microsoft clients coming from the ad agency standpoint to figure out what we're actually advertising and marketing. And so to have an incredible amount of obsession about the product and what it is, to really understand it, and like that was so important. But then throughout my career, it was very obvious, and even seeing in the software side of things, I mean, some people actually just don't care, you know, which is the sad part of it. So if like launching Office 365 as a campaign, for example, they're like, oh yeah, you know, but you can tell when they have never used it before. You can just tell in the room, you know, and it doesn't even have to be whichever vertical you're in. It doesn't actually have to be even someone in the product space. You can just tell anyone who's assigned to that specific line of business, to that specific product or service, you can tell. And I think that has been, and what you're saying is that not only is it telling, but for all the founders or for all of the entrepreneurs, anyone who's even working or associated to a startup, you know, have you put in the time that you can actually sell this, you know, with enthusiasm, right, to your friend, right? Can you talk about it? Do you talk about it in a bright way? And even if there are problems, even if there are bugs, you're hunting for bugs every single day. You're a bug. You're just hunting. You're hunting for the, you know, different things. But even still, you would talk about like, oh my God, this is awesome. We have all these things happening. You know, there's just a different kind of light that comes out of you, you know, when you're talking about, because everyone understands the software development cycle of it, and that's part of the process. And you have to trust the process.
Well, and Karen, I mean, and that's where I kind of like, when I look at kind of all the bright spots for me in my career have been when I worked on teams that had that, like Office for Mac was like that. This was like a group of 250 people. Well, 200. I grew it to 250. So 250 people inside Microsoft, back when it was a Microsoft versus Apple, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates heyday. And they were like so passionate. They're like, I'm only at Microsoft because I get to do this. When I lost people from the team, it was because they finally got their dream job at Apple. Right? So I had this group of people, like, that's what they just wanted to do. Xbox was like that, too. It was like, Xbox really stood out as, like, everybody cared, right? Well, because, first of all, you got to use your Xbox to test the product. So, oh, my God, right? And so it was this, and I think any entrepreneur, right, it's like, and this is where it all ties together for me, like, whether it was big companies, little companies, it's like, I worked on stuff because I believed, and I put everything into that belief, right? And part of it is not accepting no. Part of it is not accepting the status quo. Part of it is being willing to see what's real, right? The more you can see what's actually real, and egos get in the way of that all the time, right?
How did you fight, Craig? How did you fight for your conviction? How did you fight? And what I mean by fight, I don't mean like, I'm not saying violently. I'm not talking about punching or hitting. I'm saying, how did you fight for hope? How did you fight it in a way?
Well, I mean,
you know,
it is,
because you're dealing with other thinkers. You're dealing with other executives. You're dealing with other, you know, authorities and such like that.
Well, for
how did you fight?
The best way to fight it is to show it. Right, so if I, like with DirectX, right, like I said, where things turned around was when I showed the people who were completely convicted you could never get games on Windows, right? When I showed them what for them was a state-of-the-art video game running as if, like running better than what would run on DOS, right? Better than, right? DOS was the competitor to Windows, ironically, for Microsoft, right? And for because there was so much on DOS already, and that was the turnaround point. Same with like when I showed the CEO of my little compiler company 32-bit apps running on Windows, which was not possible, right? Then people go, oh, then what? That typically unlocks the spigot. So, and which is why, you know, in startups, for example, like. That's that early demo, right? That can turn, combine your passion with something that proves it, right? It could be all smoke and mirrors behind, right? No, I don't recommend the Theranos level of smoke and mirrors. Right? but you could be like, this is like not where it's not perfect yet, but look, right? Because the April '95 was like that. I had like one graphics card. I worked on one graphics card with one sound card, right? And at the time, there was dozens and dozens of them. We had this. In fact, we had this amazing event. So many things we created. One of the things we created, we called it Meltdown, and we had a hardware evangelist, and he would bring in all of the different hardware companies, and then we had the game evangelist. We bring in all the game companies, put them all together, try all these permutations of hardware, and watch things melt down. And so
yeah, the ultimate adult version of a LAN party. Let's go.
Well, it was a hardware party, really. But and if we kind of go forward in time, we can talk a little bit about how I brought these learnings to my startup experience. But for me, it's, and this is you either have it or you don't. It's not really a lot of stuff is practice, right? And being willing to fail. It's doing the reps. It's being willing to fail. It's failing. It's learning from failure as opposed to blaming others, which is also super common, right? But people very often have reasons. There's all these reasons, but none of the reasons were me, right? All the reasons were external, right? And the odds are good that you're the common theme through all the things that went right or wrong. So maybe look at yourself. So it's being willing to see what's real about what's going on, being willing to look at your failures and your successes. But it's also holding it. It's like this. That's all. Like you could just do the reps to get better at that. But conviction, belief, like having the passion, right? You got to find that, right? It's not really teachable. You got to find it for yourself and then bring that, because that's what changes minds.
Did you have a through line? Because, you love math. We can talk about that for a second. But is there a through line of your relationship with math to coding to then actually realizing what magic you can bring on board and the reality that you can bring with your code? Is there a through line there with your relationship with math? Because to get to conviction, because I feel like when you're so much of a genius, when you're like, I got this, I solved the freaking problem, and you're like, you did all the things, you mitigated all the risks, you checked out all the plan B, C, D, F, G, and you're like, nope, unbreakable, this is unstoppable, this is it. So I wonder, because a lot of people, have this amazing relationship with math as they go in through their engineering career, is there anything that really you see as a through line there to get to this point of conviction that you're able to feel so strong about your solution? Well, or whatever solution you come up with.
So for me, I have a joint honors degree in mathematical physics and computer science, and that's what I went and did my grad work in mathematical physics. But I was not. I wasn't the kind of person that was willing to sign up. After a year and a half, I realized I wasn't the kind of person that could spend 7 years on one problem, which is not in my nature. We need people to do that. The world needs people willing to grind on hard problems that take a really long time. But I'm much more of a let's go do something kind of guy. But what I loved about math, and what I still love about math and physics, right, is being able to solve. It's like it describes the world. You solve really interesting problems. And so if I was to try to find a through line, right, it's like getting that confidence that you can solve hard problems. So I was to generalize what a math degree, which is like distinct from a math major. I have of 3/4 of my courses were all mathematics and computer science, and I had a dozen courses that were not that. But it's funny, at Waterloo they told you had to have 12 non-maths minimum of your 48 courses. So I took like 4 physics courses, 4 economic courses, an accounting course. It's like, you want to call them non-maths, but they're from different departments, right? They didn't count as math. So I took a bunch of non-maths. So it was all math all the time.
You're so disciplined, Craig.
Just solve the problems, right?
Math.
And then the other thing that I think that really you want to embrace as a coder, especially if you get to build stuff like it's no different than painting. It's no different than sculpting.
Aww.
It's a creative process, right? It's like if you're not just going in going, I have this job to do, but you're actually like, which by the way, I've been there, done that. It's not fun, right?
Yeah.
But if you look at the creative process of building software, right? Whether you're, by the way, thinking about it from a product program management perspective, which is defining what you're going to go do, because you need to think through all kinds of things, including the engineering consequences, or if you're the general manager, thinking through how marketing and biz dev and sales and engineering and product management and QA are all coming together, it's like problem solving, right? It's problem solving and creativity meet each other. And that is really, if you look at kind of an engineer who takes a bunch of math courses and takes a bunch of computer science courses, or if you're talking about an actual engineer, mechanical, electrical, chemical, they take a whole bunch of other different kind of courses. But you're building that muscle in university to solve problems, hard problems, getting that confidence in your own ability to do that. And then in software, at least, like I've always loved it. It's always been a form of self-expression for me. I mean, this current game I'm building in my startup, which, and by the way, just to completely fast forward to now, and then we'll go back in time again. But, it was the end of November, and I'd never so first of all, I'd never built a mobile game before, never worked on anything, never touched Unity, didn't know anything on Apple, never done any of it. So November 29th, I'm like, I had this idea for a game, which is like a block breaker game, kind of like if you were to take Breakout and Arkanoid and all these games and put them on a ton of steroids and modernize them. I wanted to, so I'm like, okay, I'll buy a Mac, I have my little, I can't quite make it reach the camera.
You broke all rules.
But it's one of the little new Mac, the new Mac Minis that are the size of an Apple TV but taller.
Yeah.
Oh my God, running an M4 chip. Oh my God, so I bought a Mac. I installed Unity, and I started Googling, right?
Yeah.
Fast forward 3 months, and it was 3 months later in December. No, 2 months later, I had it up and running in the App Store, right? And so, right, it's that I love. Like it's if I look at that, it's all the same through line for me. It's like I'm confident in my problem solving abilities. I'm confident I can go find the answer if I don't know it already. And oh my God, parenthetically, we could do a whole session on AI. Oh my God, AI just makes everything easier now, right?
Yeah.
Like it's insane making sometimes because it's like you really have to yourself sometimes trying to get AI to do what you want. But it's an accelerant that I've never seen. I mean, I thought the internet and Googling accelerated human knowledge and human, problem solving. Nope. This is like puts so much gas on the fire. It's like I feel like it's a giant bonfire now. But the point being that it's all about that same through line going back to the 80s for me. 1980s, not the 1880s. I'm not that old. Just to clarify, I'm not 160 years old. But that through line
vampire
from the 80s, it was like I got my first computer when I was 14. I had access to my first computer when I was 14. It was a Commodore PET with this little chick keyboard and 8 kilobytes of memory. But I love science and I love math even then, and what I came to realize, it's problem solving and creativity meet each other, right? And that scales all over. That scales to whether you're doing it yourself, right? Like I've done a bunch of stuff myself, but and it scales through building an organization. Whether it was the startup that or DirectX was suddenly I had 100 people, or my first startup where I went from 0 to 80. I got really lucky at Microsoft. One of the things that we didn't talk about, actually, I've totally spaced on, was there was this Kinect sensor Microsoft launched as part of the Xbox 360. it was a really interesting sensor because it was the first machine learning trained computer vision sensor that could track a human, right? Terrible idea in the living room. So first of all, it's like know your audience. Yeah. That. Yeah. I launched that. That was part of Xbox One, which was a terrible idea. I know why we did it, but it added $100 in cost to the Xbox One and basically cost us the PS5 Xbox One race back then, right?
Yes.
And Microsoft pulled the sensor out in like 2017 or something like that. But I was asked to, in 2011, I got a call. I was actually considering leaving Microsoft. The guy that brought me in had left, and there was a bunch of changes, and I'm like, maybe I'll go work at Apple. I was considering that. Maybe I've never done that before. But then I got this call from a guy. He's like, hey, we went and announced we're bringing the Kinect sensor to Windows. We don't know what that means. If we gave you 80 headcount, not people, but just the ability to hire, and some office space, would you consider figuring it out? I'm like,
are you interested?
It's like, hell yeah. It's like, and so what I figured out was that the Kinect sensor was super powerful in the hands of not gamers. Because by the way, the Xbox sensor in the living room is like it's like move your couch. The only thing worse than the Xbox 360 with the sensor in your living room from a risk to limb in life is doing that with a sensor on your head, and now you've got VR. I'll just wander my living room blind. What could possibly go wrong? But and Kinect was also exhausting, right? So it was super cool, but it didn't kind of align with what gamers, and we didn't convert enough non-gamer. I mean, there was the Wii, which was easier. It was a great, by the way, it was brilliant invention. Brilliant invention, amazing title shipped. It just didn't quite stick. But in the enterprise space, very generically for not games, it turned out there was an enormous opportunity. And so even now, the Kinect sensor still has a life amongst all kinds of, and literally from, here's my favorite example. So I step back. One of the things I wanted to do with the Kinect sensor, because it was a super entrepreneur. There was a lot of entrepreneurs trying to do all kinds of neat things with the Kinect sensor, right? And so I'm like, I have an idea. I'll work with Techstars. And we worked with Techstars to, I know you were there, right? But
I mentored there.
We put out a call for proposals. We said we would take 10. We are flooded with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ideas. It took us so long to go through them all, but we reduced it down to 11. I couldn't get down to 10. I got down to 11, like Spinal Tap. I got it down to 11. We set up space in South Lake Union, and we brought them all in, and I spent 3 days a week in South Lake Union with all these entrepreneurs. One of my most amazing stories, so many things got built that were amazing, but was they used the Kinect sensor in the operating theater so that a surgeon who typically to interact with images would have to leave the sterile space, change things, come back in. Or I remember one of the surgeons who was doing the startup told me about Nurse Mouse, where you asked your nurse to try to get the picture you want, and he likened it to asking your aged grandmother to hang a picture while you sat on the couch and gave her directions. And so it turned out to be this amazing, like, time-saving tool in an operating room. And when you're open in the, like, I didn't know. I had this like 3-hour spinal surgery done in like the end of the 90s. I didn't know that a good chunk of that time the doctor was like fucking around, pardon my language, in another room. Craig's on the operating table, neck open, potentially paralyzed from the waist down. It's like, oh, excuse me, I gotta go fuck around with the image. So what an amazing, I mean, there are many stories like that, but what an amazing...
Everyone go get your surgeries now.
what an
we got the
amazing
technology.
Invention, you know? And what I love, and the same thing happened with, you know, so the Kinect sensors was a fun example of it was literally, I went from 0 to 80 people, and I brought, one of the things about Kinect that was amazing, we were on the forefront of computer vision, on the forefront of of machine learning long before. It was the early days, and that's why I first got my exposure to the power of AI. Was like in the core algorithms that underlie all of it is kind of what we had to do for the Kinect sensor. And there's neat things you had to do, like you collected all this footage of people interacting. You hired people to mark it up. It looks like you want to.
Wait, hold on. So yeah, because yes, and I want to pause a little bit on that Techstars part because we gotta illustrate this. The opportunity when you were doing this whole, stuff at Microsoft, when you're at a higher buying power position and you're able to have the capital and resources at a large enterprise level to be able to create something huge like that, and then you're able to go in your local community where economic development happens, where innovation really is they're going against the grain, and you provided opportunity to a bunch of technical founders who, it's kind of like creating a widget for the app, right? In a sense, right? It's like, how can we create an integration almost? And what you provided was a space. You gave space and opportunity for them to even turn into vendors, one. Two, be able to have the opportunity to create a solution with you guys and able to understand how could it even expand. It was collaborative.
Yep.
And not only that, to be able to have that association of building something that could be real, but with someone, you in that instance, to be able to work together on par, like a very veteran, tech person, and then someone who's like, hey, I might be breaking a bunch of shit, but you're able to guide them in that way, and then you turn them basically into vendors, and through that process, you would have definitely have been able to provide a confidence loop, one, but two, the point of just being able to facilitate that, to me, is the greatest opportunity that from a buyer's perspective, you're able to do. That leads, that kind of camaraderie and that kind of opportunity changes lives from one founder to another. One, because it just takes one person, one huge ass B2B contract.
Oh yeah, it makes or breaks you.
To change everything, right? Yep. But not even if they didn't win. Maybe they weren't number one, but they were number 2, 3, 4, 5. Having that in their portfolio to be able to break through, to work on the source code together with you in some shape or form, that's incredible. And that's something that they're able to take on to the next to show activity that is necessary from an investor's point of view, or from someone else that if they're trying to find a new co-founding team or something like that. Like, that is the opportunities we should see more and more and more, not in the way I believe. I really align with that perspective, because that's really what I would like to see more often, is that the people with the buying power to actually be able to do exactly what you did, that allows these smaller vendors to have the opportunity to actually work on that. And it's not like a competition necessarily in a way, but like you're allowed to really problem solve, and it doesn't feel like a hackathon. It doesn't feel like it's just going to go away. It's real. It's a real business problem. So thank you for not only sitting with them for 3 days a week kind of thing. That's incredible. So anyways, I just really want to acknowledge that, because that to me is like the most ethical and right way to be able to do business with each other in a way that's big and small.
It was, and it was super, like, what was amazing to me, and this is the other thing too, right, that I've seen over and over again, when you build core technology, whether it be DirectX, Kinect, the Windows Extender, is that you never know what people are gonna do with it. Like, did I imagine in a million years that NVIDIA would be the company they are today? When I think back to Jensen in those really early days, and everyone was just kind of scrapping to try to make a business.
Yeah, they're just at Denny's hanging out. Yeah,
grinding. What an interesting, and he's a guy that just took it and, oh my God, built one of the largest market cap companies in the world, and is still around. There aren't many of those founders left around that have done that. So kudos to him. But to see that, never in a million years did I imagine. But I look at I have my computer right next to me here. I build a new one. I build my own computer, so I build a new one every year, and I name them like car model years, and they're called Kick-Ass. So Kick-Ass 2022, 23, 24. Well, Kick-Ass 25, which just got its 5090 graphics card, which was really hard to get. Nvidia just launched them back in January, and they're like, they do not make enough. Oh my God! See, this thing is you've never seen. I've never seen anything like it. First of all, 32 gigabytes of RAM on a graphics card. Like, what? How many? And over 10 billion transistors. Like, what? When I go back to, in the 90s, everyone knew that the smallest process tech for microprocessors was going to be 28 nanometer. We all just knew it. Just like, by the way, we knew the universe was only 13 billion light years across because the speed of light was constant. And then somewhere along the way, the universe got to be 60 or 70 or 80 billion light years across. I'm like, what happened? Well, and somewhere along the way, laws of physics began. We now have like 3 nanometer tech, right? And so now you can build like a gabillion transistors. And now Apple is like, oh my God, the whole industry is amazing. You never know. Right?
We need a meme of you, Craig. What happened?
I know, but what happened?
It just exploded.
What, the universe just got how many billion light years bigger when I wasn't looking? But the point is that, working on things like that, where you never know where it's going to get taken, that was the inspiration. So we were to kind of
That's uncharted territory.
Yeah.
Like,
if you were to,
that's the fun part of it.
It is totally the fun part. And if we go back to your second part you wanted to talk about, which is like money in a downturn.
Yes.
So when I left Microsoft at the end of it was technically January 30th, but I was gone. I overlapped when I went to work. When I started at Action Engine, and there was like 4 of us. And the idea that appealed to me at the end of the very end of the 90s is you could see smartphones were coming. There was a Palm device that had a plastic antenna you moved up, and it would do use the pager network, but you could actually do emails and stuff. But it used the pager network, which, by the way, if you tried to send more than 8 kilobytes over, it crapped out. So you had to find a way on this device to keep everything really small, and so and then it was the early eras of Nokia was involved, and Samsung was involved, and it was the Windows Mobile heyday. But there was Symbian and there was Palm OS. So it was like, hey, there's all these the universe was heterogeneous. So I had this. So there was no homogeneity. It was lots of different things, right? So it's that DirectX problem all over again. What are you going to target?
Exactly.
And I believed smartphones would be ubiquitous and heterogeneous. So I believed there'd be more than one operating system as a winner. I believed there'd be lots of smartphones. Now this is end of '99, right?
Incredible.
And so I started a company with these guys, and I met with a couple of people who had this interesting idea where they built an app. And the app integrated.
Wait, Craig, you have to say how you learned about this. You have to say how you're introduced to be asked to be a CEO and co-founder.
Oh, well, that was totally. I think they were.
How it actually started.
Yeah. Well, so there was these 3 guys, and they built this prototype app on the Palm device that let you basically. You could through the use of sentences, highly not like AI where you have open unstructured, but structured sentences, to order, book a hotel room, right? Make a flight reservation. So they had this idea of an assistant that would for on the go executives that would book their flights and handle their hotels and do it all simply, right? Interesting idea. But so they approached me to come be the CEO of this. They were literally my wife likes to call it the wife network. So yeah. So it's the wife network because the spouse of the guy who approached me knew my wife, right? And so they were looking for somebody with like, so I was a general manager at Microsoft at the time. I'd done not only, we never even talked about Windows Media. My favorite thing about Windows Media is that the reason I left Microsoft is I spent a year fighting to get Windows Media built in to Windows 2000, which became Windows XP, which became the Windows, all the Windows.
This is why you're such a gladiator. I knew that you fought a lot.
And then they like, didn't want to do it, and they didn't want to do it, and they didn't want to do it. And when I finally got them to agree, I went to my boss and went, I can't do this anymore. I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Trying to like I just can't do this. Like, we've become big. The company had gone from 12,000 to 40,000 in my 6.5 years, and we've become more interested in our bureaucracies and processes than in doing innovations for customers. Ironically, by the way, the EU sued Microsoft over including media players in Windows, and so there's a SKU of Windows still that you can buy that doesn't have any media playback technology, which I find absurd. Can you imagine a phone that couldn't play a video? I mean, that's what the EU decided. This is what happens when you take a bunch of... Oh, anyway, I won't... I have opinions on that. I will zip it. I have opinions on that. But I'm famous. I was so excited. Like, because by the way, the other thing that happened is there was the whole antitrust trial that Microsoft went through.
Yes.
And turns out the core of that was something different. The DOJ was looking at all kinds of things, including media. And so it turned out that there was some meeting that happened with Apple, and some things were said, and email got sent, and that turned into that program manager friend of mine I told you about spent 2 years being trained and prepped to be a witness for the antitrust trial. So that was going on, and then and then we got antitrusted on Windows Media. So I'm like, yes, I'm a double winner on antitrust. But why I left was the fight.
Check,
exactly. Why I left Microsoft, I wanted to go anyway, and so when this 3 guys came to me and went, "Hey, we really like your background." At the time, Microsoft was a big deal. It's not a big deal as it was back. It's still a big deal, but it wasn't. It was a big deal in the '90s because there weren't many tech companies, right? And it was the successful tech company. So Microsoft pedigrees were super valued. So his wife talked to my wife. My wife talked to me. I said, sure, I'll talk to them. And when they...
But what went through your mind that made you decide, okay, I'm going to have a conversation?
Well, it was luck. I knew I wanted to leave Microsoft. I knew I wanted to do a startup of some kind. I didn't want to be at a big company anymore. My experience at Microsoft had been very much little teams. DirectX was 100 people. Windows Media team was maybe 200. In that sweet spot of you kind of know everybody, you kind of know you can know all the stuff, and it didn't feel big company-ish until the end, where it was like, man, we're moving so slow, this will kill us. By the way, lost decade, right? Decade of no progress, right? For Microsoft stock price.
Wait, hold on. Greg. This is why I think a lot of we've been seeing a lot lately. A lot of the bigger companies are have a startup mindset, and they're really trying to go through the bureaucracy of things, doing change management culture. They're really trying, but it's so embedded in the culture that it really has to go from top down.
And it's a bunch of people saying, act like a startup who've never done it.
Yeah.
It's very easy.
It's so funny the other way around, how startups are you can't act like an enterprise. An enterprise it's a really weird kind of dynamic. But I think that's a competitive advantage. If you've been in both, you understand and you know how to navigate both.
And the thing is that they. It's like a group of guys getting together and saying, we're going to figure out what's right for women. That's, by the way, I think the history of mankind and the patriarchy, right? Yeah. This is a bunch of bureaucrats going, we're going to be startup people now. I have an idea. Leave your cushy little position and go out without a net and see how, then come back and talk to me about acting like a startup.
Or at least fund that area. what I mean? Like, start somewhere. Okay, but back to how you learned.
And so
Yeah.
I was simply interested in doing a startup. I hadn't really figured out what. I just knew I wanted to leave Microsoft. So I was open to any conversation, really.
Okay.
Right? I'm also a person who's like, oh, sure, I'll have a conversation. Can never hurt.
But not only that, I want to also emphasize the luck and timing, because a lot of people think there's a lot of like hard work involved. There's a lot of this stuff, but luck is really a part of the equation. And how you gather luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And so this is a defining moment of exactly where this goes. Sorry, I just want to be able to bookmark that, because it's very important. Because if people are like, why isn't this happening for me? Or there's a lot that goes into it as how you almost manufacture or make luck.
Well, and it's like luck is always available. You just have to be willing to recognize it and seize it and deal with ambiguity.
Seize the opportunity.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah, and if you don't, right? So for me, it was like, oh, this is interesting. By the way, TLDR and Action Engine, it was too early, right? Like until the iPhone shipped in 2007, which really pivoted the world. That's when the world changed around smartphones. But so what happened?
But the steps are you met them, and then what happened after that?
And what was interesting, I'm like, that got me thinking. So as I was noodling on it, I was like, smart device.
Wait, was this like a 30-minute conversation? Was this like a half day?
It wasn't long.
Like, what did they show you? What did they talk to you about? And then how did you guys?
Basically, it was like, well, they knew each other because my wife knew his wife, and so we just sat. I don't remember how long we talked. It was not a
But
marathon.
you didn't know who they were, though.
Didn't know them.
Okay.
Probably met them. I'm not very good with single meetings, so I probably met them at some point around the Seattle scene. But so I took the meeting. I went off and thought about it. They basically showed me their demo, and they talked to me what they wanted to build, and I'm like, of course, I'm pulling a Craig, which is, it's nice that you want to build that, but I actually think we should do something different. And so, what got me thinking? It got me thinking about, so the Palm Pilot with this little antenna had me think about, there was things like, you had these, like, back when PDAs were a thing with color screens, and there was this compact iPack, I remember, you could slide it. It was a monster. See, it was like, you slid it in a backpack, and then you could stick a cellular radio in it, which got you, like, 28.8, 14K connection, kind of like dial-up. And I was like, it's just a matter of time until smartphones become powerful, right? Don't know when, but of course it will happen. I mean, of course it will happen, was my thought.
Yeah.
And so, if somebody, and there'll be a bunch of different platforms. I was thinking about DirectX and why no one could crack the game problem, because there was all these different pieces of hardware to run on, and like, what were you supposed to do? Target all of them? And I figured that'd be the same with smart devices, and browsers weren't the right answer, especially on these slow networks. It needed to be an app with a network connection that could optimize the connection. And it's like, especially in that era. So I'm like, so if we built a platform, and our first apps could be these things they wanted to do, but my thought was, we'll build a platform, we'll go to mobile operators, right? And we'll say, hey, you're launching smartphones. Wouldn't it be great if you could launch them with services that customers actually like, right? And by the way, we'll build. And so at first I'm like, I'll just sell a platform because I had this Microsoft. And by the way, that's how I raised money. So what made me so different in the beginning of 2000 as a history lesson for those that don't remember or weren't born or were small children. Through the 90s was the dot-com bubble. And what was happening was the internet was becoming like, everyone was in a frenzy over the idea of everyone being online and what was possible. And so basically, if you had a website idea, just a fucking, pardon my language, a freaking website,
do it.
Right?
Yeah.
You had a freaking website, that got funding, right? And that was very much the tulip bulb phenomena of like, why are tulip bulbs valuable? Because someone will pay for them, right until everyone stops. And so when I appeared on the scene, purely by, again, timing, both good and bad, as we'll find out shortly, it was like there were people that were hungry for, investors, that were hungry for something that was like more meaty. that had more, that maybe required longer time to build, right? But actually had like staying power as opposed to, dogfood.com, parakeetfood.com, umbrellasforyourdog.com, right? And so the trick was to identify those people, right?
They're done eating fast food, Craig.
They were. It was like, I'm hungry. Exactly. I'm hungry an hour later and I feel sick to my stomach. So
Hilarious. Oh my god.
So the thing was, and I was nervous. So I was actually a little nervous about the stock market, right? I remember.
Of course, how can you not? Everyone's like talking about. I mean, when the economic downturn, it's just you can't turn it off, and so it's like, how do you stay guarded in your mind?
It was actually different. First, the problem was everyone was talking about how the stock market would never stop growing. So when I left Microsoft, I met with an investment banker who's like, you need to take all of your stock, and you need to basically leverage buy even more, because this was when Microsoft stock was like 120, because it's going to 150, and I'm like. I asked a question, why? And this is some like senior executive at Goldman or wherever it was, and was like, I'm like, why? He's like, well, because it will, because that's just what it's always been doing. And I'm like, well, hasn't always been doing it. It just did. And here's what had happened. Microsoft went from a multiple of like 20 times earnings to 30 times earnings to 50 to 75 times earnings. So it was trading at a multiple of like 80 times earnings. I'm like, this, what? At some point, what? 1 million times earnings? Like, what are you even talking about? I just don't believe. So I was like, I don't believe the stock market will keep growing. Everyone else did, right? Most people did. If people didn't, then they would have shorted, made a bunch of money, and I'm like, I'm nervous. So so that factored in my thought process about looking for investors. And so when I talked to different investors, there were a whole bunch of like little VCs that had popped up because people had made dumb money from umbrellasforyourdog.com, and then thought because they made a bunch of money, they thought they were geniuses, so they were investing.
Yeah.
But they only wanted to invest in more umbrellasforyourcat.com, and I'm like, different kinds of umbrellas, right?
This is like poker in real life, but like back in the heydays. Okay,
so
yes.
I'm like, I want investors that have been around a long time, that have been through ups and downs, and there weren't a lot of them in the Seattle area. And I also didn't want.
There's not a lot. Yeah.
I wanted to be local,
even today,
because local has more investment. So I managed to find 2 investors like that, and so and I viewed it as future proofing myself.
Okay.
Because if something went off the rails, oh Lord, did I? So. If I was that much of a genius, I would have shorted the market and made a fortune. So I was mostly nervous, but I also had been bit badly by shorting, because there's no limit to your losses on shorts, it turns out. And so as Microsoft stock and other things were changing multiples, I'm like, this is unsustainable. I'm going to short it, and then flushed a bunch of money down the drain.
Okay.
But I did bet on it from a security of my investors. So I closed my first round in April of 2000. That was roughly at the time the NASDAQ was peaking at 5,000.
How much was that?
No, that's just the number of the market.
No, the
right?
first round. How much did you raise
my
for the
first
first
round.
round?
Sorry, I thought you were asking with the NASDAQ. I'm like, it was 5,000. It was a $7.5 million round, $8 million.
Okay, so
round.
that was your first.
That was my
flag
first.
on the
That was
ground.
my Series A. I had raised $1 million. I'd found a small investor that was super enthusiastic about the idea of smartphones being big. There were people that got it, especially if they'd worked at Microsoft and saw the power. Watch Moore's Law happen. Watch what it did for Microsoft and Windows, right? They were like, yes, we agree with you. This is going to happen in the space, right?
Wait,
So
can you back up 1 second? When you had your co-founders, because somehow you became CEO co-founder, there's 3 guys. They were the one who built this thing, and they were looking for a CEO. Like, why were they looking for you, 1? And then 2, how did you guys distinguish what were their roles, and how the hell did you become a CEO?
Well, it was they wanted they wanted a CEO. They knew that they knew they could. They didn't. They knew they couldn't. They had tried to raise money and couldn't. As I recall.
Okay.
They knew they were missing. You know, it was like one guy was from Boeing, one guy was from, or two of them. They were all from Boeing. Maybe they were all from Boeing. I remember they were not from a place where people went, yes, that's the hotspot of technology, right? So it was Boeing primarily, I think. Anyway, so and so
Hilarious.
I said, look, I agree, and I'm probably going to change everything, right? Because I didn't
okay with
believe
that.
there was I didn't believe there'd be a market for people that wanted to, because my whole thing was, it's like everyone you're talking about already has an assistant, a human, and the human doesn't F things up, right? And the human you can call when your hotel is messed up or when your car's not ready, right? It's like I just don't believe there's a big market for this. But it could be it could be a set of apps we could use to demo the idea of a platform where you could build any app on our platform and it would run on Palm, it would run on Nokia, it would run on Windows Mobile, right?
This is what I'm talking about. One person changes the whole damn dynamic, and it just takes one person to say, stand 2 degrees on the right and look at it the other way. And you were that person.
Yeah. Well,
congratulations, Craig.
Well, yeah. Well, it's very similar. And I, by the way, I've had my failures, right? This was a great example. Action Engine is a great example of a failure. There's lots of good stories, but I was too early. I was dead right, literally dead right. Company couldn't last that long, right? Now, there's over half the population of Earth has a smartphone, right?
Yeah, timing.
There are 2 major players, at least in the Western world. So it's still a heterogeneous environment. Everything that I thought would be true is true. And that $5 gets you 1 small cup of coffee at Starbucks or 1 egg.
Thanks for the conversion tool for 2025 people. Wait, hold on. So what did those other 3 guys do? Like, what were they? So if you're CEO, who were they?
So there's a guy with some finance background, so he became the CFO. There's a guy who was a biz dev guy. He became the biz dev guy. And then and then I had Brian. Their names are Marty, Brian, and Rick. But Brian was who's the guy who built the little Palm demo, right? And so he was going to be the CTO. That was and then there was and then they had identified a friend of theirs they'd worked for who she was going to come be the marketing person, right? But she wasn't in yet. So it was what I will give immense credit to Brian in particular for, who was the guy who'd done the building, is that I basically said, your baby's ugly. We need to go adopt a new baby. Your baby's ugly. And he was like, okay, all right. He was like, okay. And by the way, it didn't hurt that within a month I'd raised $1 million solely based on the idea that so that got them. If anything's going to convert somebody fast, and maybe there's a better way, it's when all of a sudden you have $1 million check. By the way, see $1 million check. The only string attached where it would convert. It was converted in. They have a name for them. I don't remember what the name is anymore, but it's basically this. It's just basically this. It converts when you raise money. Find a lead investor who sets a valuation. That is what this money will convert in at, right? So it was like that's how enthusiastic this small group of investors was.
And you found them here in Seattle?
Yeah, Seattle. It was Seattle based.
And so that was Seattle.
That was our first $1 million.
Yeah.
And then I raised 6.8, I think. So that with $1 million made 8 rather.
What activity did you do between those 2 points? What activity was shown that the investors then went ahead to go to that next?
I'll tell you. So I think about me in code because I love creating. I love writing code. fucking love writing code, is that even though my career took me in a way where I was like much bigger roles, it was still my hobby. So I have like half a dozen software projects I've kept going over the years that are everything from I have a ray tracer I wrote years ago that I keep working on. I have this video editing. I just have stuff. I have stuff that only for me, just for me. That was it. I just wanted to write code. So I say that only to say that what happened is in the next 2 months, while I was going around and meeting with different local investors, is I was like crazy writing code that would actually be the first platform. So I wrote the initial Palm Pilot client. I wrote the initial backend software. I was like madly coding. So basically, I don't I don't recommend doing it if you have a family.
Sorry, we just went straight there, didn't we, Craig?
Yeah. It's like, then what happens is you're working 7 days a week. So both my kids, who are, young adults now, both my kids were born during my startup. First one, we got pregnant before I raised my first round of money.
Didn't that happen all in 30 days?
It all happened in a very short period of time. And then our next one, we got pregnant 2.5 years later with the next. So both of our babies were startup babies. Now, by the end of, I flipped 3 years in. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to spend time with my kids. But not for the first 3 years I wasn't. So I was like, writing code. That's all there was to do. So what there was to do was write code and meet with investors. So 2 very different states to be in. So you're like literally switching from one state to another. But it got us to the point where I could demo. There was enough technology. It wasn't just this baling wire and smoke and mirrors, because the code that was there was just a pure demo. It didn't actually function. And so by April...
Sorry, I'm just like, my mentor always talks about vaporware.
Yes, it was vaporware. It literally didn't do anything, but it showed the concept, right?
Right.
And that's all it was meant to do. So they weren't trying. They were not doing a Theranos. They were pretending they had something. They knew it was just literally a construct that it needed to be obviously built upon.
So the investors saw enough activity, enough technology that was built,
and it met the criteria of these investors who wanted something that wasn't so. There was an appetite for things that were more substantial amongst a small...
And it sounds like they had a muscle for delayed gratification too.
They did, which was uncommon.
Yes.
The other thing they had for me, and why I picked those 2 investors, a lead and a follower, is because they'd been around forever, which meant they'd been through downturns before. I just knew something was coming. I had no idea it would be so bad. It was catastrophic because 9/11 happened in there too, right? Like a year, so the 18 months later, the Nasdaq went from 5,000 to 1,400. So it was literally at less than a third of its value. I mean, people got wiped out, right? And 9/11, so there was investment went poof. It was the Sahara Desert of investment money. And so I tried to raise. I had a lot of interest in my Series B, but no one. But people were just too nervous. So because I made the smart choice, and I didn't get a great valuation up front. I took a less than ideal valuation to get the $8 million to get the investors I wanted. And oh my God, see, did that pay off? Because when there was no one left, and no one wanted to put money in, the 2 investors flipped roles. So my following investor became the lead, and my original lead became the follower. And they put another $8 million in, which got me to my Series C, where I found a new lead, raised $15 million, and but there was progress. The thing was, and the reason they invested, they didn't just invest because they like Craig. We made substantial progress.
Of course, right? They wouldn't have that much money. No, but thank you for simplifying it that way. It's not just because we like Craig.
No, you gotta have a little more than that. So we had our first, and what was challenging as well to raise money is that the first smartphones, the U.S. was really late. the U.S.
Oh.
mobile operators were really late to adopt smartphones.
Yeah.
It was the Europeans and the Asians that led. So all of my customers were not here. And so a lot of investors were like, well, if it's not AT&T, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, oh, you American. I'm Canadian, right? I'm a Canadian inconvenience. My wife likes to joke. So I'm like, you freaking Americans. Of course you think if it's not AT&T, it doesn't matter. You know,
But money can come from
other
anywhere.
countries.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
There
Money
are
can come
other
from anywhere.
countries, and they do have phones. I know you may believe that only America has cellular networks, but it turns out these other countries were also launching faster networks. So my first deal, it was the first Windows Mobile 12 key. So it was a candy bar phone, which were the really popular format in that era because they were the small ones. It was candy bar with the 12 key, and it was running some version of Windows Mobile. And our software shipped on that phone in the UK with it was BT Cellnet. It became a different public company, but it was the biggest, second largest operator in the UK.
Wait, sorry. Was this after you raised the other 8?
This is in between. This is my first customer.
In between. Okay.
This was me getting that first customer. The point was you get that first customer. And by the way, I brought in a head of engineering. So along the way, there was the 4 of us, became 5 quickly because Riley joined. And then it kind of went like DirectX for me. All of a sudden, I was at like 70 people, and I'm like, wow, I'm doing a good job. I hired a recruiter. Then I had to fire her. I had to hire a new recruiter. Got a much better recruiter the second time, but literally hired someone to be fundamentally a recruiter. Oh my God, I can tell you the creative stories. We didn't even talk about hiring. So back when we couldn't get anybody, everyone was working at dogfood.com, right? And so there were no engineers. So I did this. I should tell you about a Connect. I did something extra funny to hire for the Connect for Windows thing. But going back to Action Engine, so I found out you could lease a PT Cruiser for like $300 a month, and that was the hotness. The Chrysler PT Cruiser was the hotness. So I leased it, had a contest for the summer, and said everyone who joins the company will get a chance to win this PT Cruiser. We'll call it Being the CEO, and we'll surround me with all the new hires, and we'll throw beanbags at me, and whoever hits me wins the car. So I hired like 35 people that summer from all over. I got my
Craig, hold on.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I've been telling people. We gotta highlight this. I tell founders and entrepreneurs and operators all the time, when you're selling to 3 doors of a house. You're selling to the front of the house, which is your prospects, your customers, and that's one story. Yep. You have a second story, which is the side of your house. That's your staff, your talent, you're acquiring talent. And then that's another story. And then you have a third story at the back, which is the door that's at the back of the kitchen, the investors, where they're all, they see all the shits and giggles, right? And a lot of the time, a lot of these founders are just doing the same story because they're burnt out with the first one, which is with the investors, getting the funds and all that kind of stuff. And they don't realize the amount of work that is necessary, which is like another full-time job for the front of the house and the side of the house. And what you just explained, Craig, what you just explained is a whole goddamn advertising campaign.
Yeah, we did this.
That you did.
I gotta tell you a parenthetical story. So inspired by being the CEO and giving away a PT Cruiser. Oh, and you had to work for us for 2 years. There was a condition, right? You had
of course, there has to be a trade-off.
You can't have a free car. You have to stay with us for 2 years, and then you get the car. And we just kept making the lease payments for a guy named Matt won it. But fast forward to Connect for Windows, I'm like, I needed to hire badly. Like I announced kind of that whole like burn your ships and figure out what to do or throw your hat over the wall. So I had announced that I was going to launch Connect for Windows in February or January of 2012. When I had 8 people working for me. I'm sorry, this was April. So I said I'm going to ship in 8 months. So I hired an external firm and we brainstormed on ideas. And they presented this idea they thought I wouldn't like, and they thought it was kind of lame. But they said, "We'll show it to you," because this one came up with it. It was this bacon themed campaign. Like just we're gonna wake up and smell the future. What's it smell like? Bacon and endless possibility. And so we ran this bacon themed campaign. Part of it was for hiring. Part of it was grassroots. We were like dropping these, like, wake up. We went to the local bars and put like we got them to take our coasters. I hired professional actors to stand on the public sidewalks. Details matter. It had to be on the public sidewalk. Got permission from the owner in front on the public sidewalk so that the damn Amazon and Google people couldn't do a thing about it. I parked a bacon cart with some of my staff and a professional caller who'd bring people over from Amazon and from Google. I went from 10 to 50 people that summer, inspired by but it was all bacon. It was like, I won an award. The team. I say it's always a team, right? Literally, is I'm doing the only work, but I was the guy that leaned into the bacon because I'm like, this is it. This will appeal. It's the right gestalt for the time. People will love it. I had vegan bacon, by the way. I had turkey bacon. So I had bacon. I had peanut butter for your bacon and hot sauce for your bacon. And you came up to our cart, and we had 3 different areas for cooking, so that vegan didn't touch the pork, didn't touch the turkey. Yeah. And so whatever you were about, you could get your bacon. We won an award for most creative ad I have it somewhere, for most creative ad campaign for recruiting. Like some ad net. So I didn't even know there was this thing. So I get called.
I'm telling you.
It's like Connect for Windows won Innovation of the Year from the GeekWire Startup people. Microsoft won a startup award from the most anti-Microsoft group I knew. So it was like, but these inspirations follow you, right? It's like the exact idea might not match, but the idea is, to your point, C, it's like you're always talking to somebody. I'm kind of marketing unplugged Craig right now. I'm not marketing professional Craig, but you want to talk to, because professional Craig might talk to an investor. Unplugged Craig probably talks to your employees to get them razzed up. And then, I have the very kind of like, my PR team has coached me and I'm talking to the press, Craig, right? But you're talking to, as the owner, as the CEO in particular, you are like the owner of the soul of the company. And the message is, what are you telling your customers? What are you telling your users? What are you telling your investors? And which, by the way, is true at a big company too, because your investors is the company you're in, right? Yeah. You still have investors. It's called your boss and their bosses and all the rest of it. And Connect was such a great example of that. So was actually Mac Office. I convinced Microsoft to invest heavily in it. I got a bunch of staff added. Inside of things were not warm and fuzzy between Steve and Bill at the time, and yet I convinced them. It was this brilliant pitch. I still have my email, because if I can say so myself, and I know it was brilliant because Ballmer didn't fire me. So I sent Ballmer and Gates an email explaining how we were going to leave. So there were companies all over, because Macs were so popular inside these companies, that were declining to go to SharePoint. They were declining to Exchange. They were declining to all these strategic cloud, we didn't call them cloud at the time, but cloud investments, because there was no good Office support. So I'm like, it's time. We've not treated this like it matters. It's time. And by God, we made it time. So, like, you're talking to your investors, right? It might be Bill and Steve. God help you. It might be your local VCs. It might be your, friends and family. But you have a message for them. It's always reasons to believe, right? Your message is always reasons to believe. And part of it is just the hook, right? Like, the bacon thing was so funny. And by the way, it followed me forever. I still heard about bacon after I left Microsoft. So
it's memorable. It's incredible. Great first impression.
It's still on the internet. And the funny thing is so Amazon tried to copy us, and they sent a donut. Like they sent.
That's a great compliment, Craig.
It was and they did, but they didn't do their homework, right? Their homework. By the way, you're successful when the head of HR at Amazon calls the head of HR, because they knew each other at Microsoft, to complain about our recruiting tactics, right? I'm like, I'm sorry, so I get contacted, and I'm like, what can I tell you? We're on public property, right? We're just offering bacon if people come and take the bacon. and then
But
hear
wait,
about
hold
our
on.
dog.
This whole bacon thing, the genius part of this is that while everyone was using vision, right, or other means, the sensory tactic that you did was the smell. And it's so genius because you wanted someone already local. You wanted someone within the radius that is performing at a really high tier. You needed competent engineers. You needed competent professionals to be able to poach. You didn't have time to have too much of the churn because you're already doing that. It was just so amazing how you're able to do that. And then not only that, you needed word of mouth referrals. You needed it to be viral. And that, all those elements that you did there, and then also accommodating from vegan to all the different ranges, is kind of like,
it's the details, right?
it's culture. That in itself is a message of culture. This is the leadership. This is what we're doing. We're opening to anyone. We want everyone and anyone to try and apply. That's incredible. And it's like not necessarily an open concert. It's like an open but private and exclusive concert that you're saying, but you're advertising it to everyone. Yep. So you have really, that's incredible.
It was.
Okay.
It was. And by the way, just as a side note, and then is a little moment of evil genius. Because it had made the rounds, and everyone had, like, especially because I was part of the Xbox team at that point. I wasn't working at Xbox. My success at Connect had them bring me over. That's how I ended up with the new job running Xbox Live.
Yeah.
The product program management for Xbox Live. I was like, there was this concept Microsoft had called brown bags, right? And it was like, come and learn about something. And I'm like, hey, come and learn. By the way, we're bringing the bacon. I brought the bacon cart onto the Studios West, where Xbox was, place, and parked the bacon cart outside of the Commons and drew people in. Because everyone knew brown bags were about, literally, you were trying to like teach other engineers what you're building, so they might want to apply for one of your jobs. That was one of the major points of them. The question is, how do you get them to come in? Well, everyone in E&D, Entertainment and Devices at the time, or Interactive Entertainment Business, I think it was called later. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, everyone had heard of it, and it's like, hey, I brought it in. Like, come have some bacon. Hey, while you're having the bacon, did you know we're doing a brown bag upstairs? So I managed to poach a bunch of internal people, too. But
the king of poaching, holy crap!
You do what you gotta do, man. But the PT Cruiser got me. It's the same thing. It went viral, right? It's like you'll find articles if you just Google Action Engine PT Cruiser. Like, you'll find articles about these crazy startup people giving a car away.
But Craig, that's a different kind of golden handcuffs. That's the exciting part of it. So talking about golden handcuffs as in, having to stay with a company for so many kind of years and everything. And usually it's as boring as it is black and white on ink on a piece of paper. But to make it fun, to make it something that is rewarding in that way, again, culture. And it comes from the leader, and doing it in that way, it showcases that you are promising and you're committing to some kind of reward that allows for something that feels fun on top of the compensation of everything else. Whereas if it feels really dry and it's just the golden handcuffs that are normal, but like the ability, what I'm trying to say is that you spent your money very wisely. And what I mean by that is that the amount of money that you've raised, you invested it back into the people. You invested it in a way to attract certain talent to be able to work at the highest level that you had to go, because you just had to really press gas on the pedal, right? And so that to me is like, when we hear a lot of these founders who are raising multi-million dollars, of these rounds, it's kind of like, what do you do with that money? And that's kind of what I want to highlight is like, if you're going super fast, if you're the thing that you're talking about, scaling through people, if you have something that is on the product roadmap and you really got to meet this, you really want to meet this, but it's the fun side of it. Instead of asking for funds, you're asking for people to join you along for the cause and for the mission and joining along for the ride. And that is what allows you to meet, and then you're blinking. You're like, holy shit, why are there so many people around me and I'm not coding anymore? How are we here again? Damn it, and I need bacon.
At least by the time I got to there, I knew I wasn't coding anymore. At Action Engine, I still, I spent not unreasonable. Eventually, I had to stop because there was just too much to do. But the other thing too, right, is like is when you think about what your marketing to customers, marketing to investors, marketing to employees. If you're building a startup, right, and it's not just three of you writing some code, or or a guy alone with his big screen TV and his powerful computer writing a game. Odds are good you're hiring people from different disciplines.
Yes.
And so it's also learning to speak the language and being open to. So it's about. This is such a. What a commentary.
Spit it out.
Well, I'm just thinking about the commentary it says in America that we now can't talk about diversity anymore without it being political. But if you think about diversity of if you're selling to the human race, you're building a product for humans, then you need to have humans, which means you need to be willing to hear what humans have to say. And humans come in different genders, they come in different skin tones, they come in different backgrounds, they come in different educational standards, they come from different countries, they come from different cultures, right? Da 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 da. And so if you want to build something for humans, you want to be as inclusive as you can in your team, right? In your product, right? You want to be thinking about that. And so one of the things, if I was to like pass a lesson learned from my first startup, which I got so much mileage out of, is that's where I really learned to take into account everyone's opinion. So I never had multiple bosses before. That's what happens when you get a board and investors, right? I'd never had, they called it general manager at Microsoft, but it was engineering general manager. True general manager positions where you have marketing, sales, business development, those don't exist typically. Although Connect for Windows it did, because I had to build a little license. That was the exciting part too, is I got to build every discipline. And Mac Office had marketing as well, so that was awesome. But typically, so I had gone from engineers are king of the world, right? That was Microsoft. Engineers were king. To the startup, and it's like, why? I need sales, I need marketing, and I need business development, and they all speak different languages. And they're all
yes, they do.
And they come from different backgrounds, right? So, so it's
that's the most annoying part.
The big addition where I hired a lot of people not from Microsoft, and I really focused my time as I was spinning up marketing, spinning up biz dev, spinning up sales, so spending the majority of my time with those people, but with the people in those functions, because that was my biggest gap area.
How did you get them to all work with each other? So what I mean by annoying is like, the annoying part of like, okay, you brought all these different people. You know that it's necessary for all their perspectives to come through for this to be a powerhouse situation. But from them coming from all the different backgrounds, they have different experiences. They may have not always worked at, a huge corporation umbrella like Microsoft with this huge amount of fundamentals and stuff like that. And you had to probably balance the different levels. How did you lead that allowed them to have a safe environment for them to talk to you about what's on their mind, their concerns, how to do it in the most pragmatic way that allowed them to actually work very well with each other? Because that's the thing. If you can leave the room and they're able to do what they're able to do and you're able to scale in that way, you freaking have won.
Well, so, there's a couple of factors, and I've learned, these are learned, this is learnable, right? So part of it, so empathy is learnable. You just have to be willing, right? Empathy is learnable. Hearing where someone comes from is learnable. Looking for the similarities is learnable. And so, when I look at kind of taking on multiple disciplines and I always like to joke now, because it really is true now, and I learned it. I cut my teeth on an action engine, is I'm like the Rosetta Stone between sales, marketing, product, engineering, right?
Wait, did you just say Rosetta Stone?
Rosetta Stone. I translate. I'm the translation man.
That's exactly it. That is exactly the role of the CEO.
Because, lawyers, right?
Yes.
I swear to God, in another life, I should have been a lawyer. So that was one of my favorite non. HR or HR, because some of my favorite people ever that I've worked with are HR and legal. Interesting functions, but it's about learning. It sounds so trite to say it, but it literally is. you're the guy or the gal that needs to go, okay, there's an animal in the middle. This is a trite example, right? Everyone's heard it, but and I got someone that's able to tell me about one part, trunk. Someone else will tell me about another part, the ear. Someone else will tell me the tail, and I'm the guy that goes, aha, you have an elephant. But it's also helping people say every part of the elephant matters, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's okay. You cut off the elephant's trunk, well, that's a problem. Certainly, he has cut off its ears. That's a problem. So you need all the parts, right? And so for me, it's like, and it's not only being able to hear everyone's point of view and see where the similarities are and then point it out. It's also being willing to stand up for the people that are typically undervalued. And if a tech company or a tech culture is typically everyone who's not an engineer.
We can talk about marketing if you want as an example, correct?
No, it's a quintessential example, right?
Yeah.
Of it was like that was the arrogance at Microsoft. General managers don't even need marketing, right? Mm-hmm. They're smart enough; they do everything. You're just engineers. As long as you're running the engineers and the program managers and the testers, you've got the whole business, right? And by the way, Microsoft set up that delusion for themselves back then because it was like, so you sold Office, say, and say you worked in a part of Office. It wasn't sold separately, but what they would do is they're go, okay, well, Office did $5 billion and making up $5 billion, and you worked on this part of Office, and that, and then by a process of like I don't know, distributing based on number of people working, that was $1 billion. So people will go, I have $1 billion business, and you go, really? What's the name of your head of sales? What are you talking about? Half of Microsoft was sales, by the way. That was the thing. Almost half the organization worked for half the company. Eventually, worked for a guy named Kevin Turner. I don't know what the following is, but it was like 40-some-odd thousand people. Which, by the way, that was another thing. I went and one of the things I do is I always go up the org chart and go to the very top. So whether it was, I was responsible. Yeah. So at Amazon. I was one of the things I inherited was this deal to bring the Amazon Android App Store, our third-party store, onto Windows because they had a Windows subsystem for Android. And believe it or not, our IT group wouldn't let us run. They had decided that Amazon IT had decided that we couldn't run our App Store on our own devices. They
Fantastic.
Which is a security risk. So I'm like, and this is some people, and Amazon's people down. So I double click up, I go into the phone tool, and I keep looking up until I find the direct report of Jassy, the CEO, and I send them an email going, hey, I have a problem. And then what happens is that person sends it to VPs who basically stir up a bunch of shit, and then your problem gets solved. And so I'm a big fan of like going to the key decision makers, whatever it is, right? I think that's a place you can make a difference in getting what you need done.
But they should be responsible and accountable too. So
right. Well, and people listen. The problem is when all these layers of bureaucracy get built up, it becomes its own machine, and everyone, and at individual levels, people have this much perspective, and they typically aren't interested in having any more perspective, and so that's their perspective, and you're kind of like going to be running into a wall. So if you just go up to people that can have that are more capable of seeing big picture, then you can activate an organization to get something done. Which is, by the way, what I did to get, because Connect for Windows was an enterprise sale, and Microsoft Salesforce was 40,000 strong selling to enterprises. So what I did is I went to Kevin Turner and said, I'd like you to, on the day we launched, to send it. By the way, everyone was excited about Connect. So in 2012, the head of communications for Microsoft PR, a guy named Frank Shaw, sent an email around to all the executive staff going, here's 10 reasons to feel good about, or 12 reasons to feel good about Microsoft. 8 of the stories were Connect for Windows innovation stories. So everyone was on fire about Connect. So I leveraged that. I went to Kevin and his chief of staff and went, here's what we're going to do, see? We're going to send an email to all 40,000 people saying, go sell, this will win. Because what was happening, you'd sell 2,000 Connects and you'd pull behind it millions and millions of dollars of SQL sales,
Yep.
Windows NT server sales, all this stuff, right? So
Yeah.
I went to Kevin Turner, whether it's going to the head of IT to go, what the hell, why can't I install my software on our laptop? Or going to the head of Microsoft sales going, you need to go to your, like, but it isn't like you need to. It's the Tom Sawyer, here's what I'm bringing to you.
But this is when stars are aligning. You
story
manufactured it, like in a way.
It was this innovation story that was missing for the company at that time. Now, night and day. Satya has made the company night and day unrecognizably better, right, from an innovation point of view. But back then, we were stuck. 2011, 2012, not a good time. And so I leveraged that, went up the org chart to the direct report of the CEO, right, and go, I want you. I'm Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam wants you, kind of thing. So, I think one of the things that, as an entrepreneur, whether you're trying to entrepreneur yourself inside of a 100,000 person company or entrepreneur yourself inside of like 5 of you, it's all about being willing to do whatever it takes. Talk to whoever it takes, right? So you want to know how I raised my $15 million during a tough time? I took 100 VC meetings. Freaking 100. My CFO was counting them. It took 6 months, right? You can't be stopped, right? That's the thing, right? If you
Gotta keep fighting.
You gotta keep going, right? Because eventually, right? Eventually. And things are, this was '02, and things were just starting to, like, the markets were starting to thaw, but they were thawing, but still cold. So it just took a long time. And I went up and down Sand Hill Road. I went up and down whatever the hell the equivalent in Boston is. I went to New York. Of course, the locals.
You're traveling all the time.
Oh, yeah. It was 6 months of, like, road warrior stuff, right? Because that's what it took at the time. That's what being CEO meant, right? And I brought along my, I always had traveling companions. My head of marketing would be with me, and my head of sales would be with me sometimes. My CFO was always with me, because the other thing too, right, if you're at the time my age, right, I'm not my age now, I hired somebody like me, age-wise and experience-wise, to be my CFO, COO, because I was 35-year-old punk, right? Like, I had no experience, right, outside of Microsoft. I was like my little company and my Microsoft, and I did big things at Microsoft, so I had credibility. 15 patents, inventor of DirectX. That was a really big story back then.
Right.
General manager, Microsoft executive, all that played, but I was still, what the hell does this guy know about doing a startup? People were becoming wise to, just because you made money by accident by being at Microsoft during the right time didn't actually make you clever, right? And
But there's a skepticism, right? Like, it's like, were you able to actually earn your way from 0 to 1? Were you actually able to spin something up and not just get onto that growth cycle where, you had so many legs to stand on? And the incredible thing of how you've been able to fundraise through is, I think it's the up to 35, and having that CFO, that relationship with money, that relationship with math, the relationship with numbers, understanding how to tweak every single story, every single investor pitch that you had, every single opportunity that came through, and for you to be traveling all the time in a way that, really made everything so much more harder, but in a way that now you're like, I never want to travel ever again.
Yeah, well, and then I had to fly to India. Then I was working with then I had to go to India a bunch of times for Amazon. So that rule, my I don't want to travel rule got undone again. It got undone when I worked for Time Warner. It got undone when I worked for Microsoft. Got done at Amazon. But the point being that is whether you're by yourself trying to go from 0 to 1 human, or 1 to 2, or whether you're at 500 humans, trying to launch a big product, or whether you've got this little scrappy innovative product inside of your giant company, it's the same principles apply, right? Be inclusive leader, listen, hire diverse points of view, because it makes a better product, not because someone gave you some guidelines. It has nothing to do with, it's like, you build better products for first of all, it's just more fun to have more points of view. You learn more, right? But you also build better products, which, by the way, if you build better products, more people buy them, more success, right? So it's just good business.
And
Diversity,
the baseline of capitalism as it is,
inclusion
Craig.
is good capitalism. No, totally, right? It's like, I don't understand all this nonsense going on in the political theater around this, right? It's just good capitalism, right?
Yes. Thank you.
Half the population's female, for example. So, one of the
For
things I was
example.
super passionate about at Amazon
Yeah.
when I inherited the team and needed to grow it is I was very passionate about having about two things. First of all, breaking up gender norms. So, as an example, I had a male admin, right? Like not because I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna go. No, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna bust up gender norms. I'm gonna look for people that you wouldn't expect because different perspective, right? Everyone expects your admin to be a woman. Nope, mine was a guy. Out of 9 direct reports I had, 5 were female, and that took a year. Why? Because I had to fight with recruiters. Are you sure you wanna? I mean, I can find. Look, I have some guys for you. Yes, I know you have guys. They're all over the place, and if you let me keep hiring more people like me, we'll never stop hiring people that look like me. Right? And so, but in the end, I had this team, and then that goes to, by the way, you have to be willing to, part of bringing in diverse, especially points of view and voices that are historically silenced. And I don't mean that in some kind of like menacing way, but historically.
No, but like underrepresented,
Yeah.
and they're kind of put in a ceiling, kind of boxed in a situation, and maybe even filtered through, or ideas stolen, or credibility stolen as well, right? And it's kind of like, I've lived it in a little bit, and it's been kind of shitty. It's like it's like going through all the isms, right? And so, when we met and I learned about you, it was just kind of amazing because it's kind of like, oh, I'm so honored to be collaborating with you in so many different ways, because we always kind of see like the newspaper, the headlines that would say, why can't there just be some executives that just stands up for people when they actually have the power and authority to do so? And so when learning about your story and how, you really stood up for people, and in a way that because you have the authority, it wasn't lip service, right? It was, you were walking the walk, right? And that's really important. It's the actions that matter. And I felt like, oh, okay, this is someone that I can really, talk about business, do business, all this kind of stuff, because you want to be able to spend time with someone who understands the same core values and also have a similar, mindset when it comes to capitalism too, right? And it's a very mature perspective in the most PC way I can say it, Craig.
Yeah.
It's very, very mature.
It is. One of the things that, I'm totally willing to use my privilege for good, right? Like, I am not confused. I have a couple of, for being a white male, a couple of disadvantages for a white male. So I follow this comedian named Christopher Titus, and he had a bit on Instagram last night, and he was like, and basically it boiled down to, if you're a white guy in America and you can't make something happen, that's on you. Because it's like, you don't get it easier than being a white guy in America. But there's some isms against being short, right? I'm 5'5.5". Used to be 5'6.5", but time. And short guys, just, you look at the math, there's less short guys in these positions. And by the way, I'm over 40, and in tech, you're a dino. In any other industry, my experience would be valued. In tech, somehow they think that if you're over 40, you stopped, I don't know, learning. I have theories about why people have gone there.
But people who understand entrepreneurs know that you're a student for life.
Right. Well, and it turns out the highest success rate in startups come from founders that are past 40, not under 40.
Yeah.
But the point being that you don't have a lot more privilege than I do. And so I am totally willing to leverage that, right? It's like, I get to, because I'm a white male, I get a voice at a table for no other reason, right? Which is absurd, but it's true. And so, guess what? I can use that to be an advocate, money where my mouth is, willing to take the time, invest the time. Because one of the things as well as you want to do, because one of the things I hear from women a lot is that what they don't like is when people get hired because of their gender or because of their skin color, because that
no one
actually
wants to
is
be a
bad for
DI
everybody,
case.
right?
Yeah.
If you're a woman and you're now women are getting, if you are being painted with the, oh, you're just hired because you're a woman brush, that sucks. And so I'm going to be the guy that spends extra time to find the qualified woman, in this case of Amazon, because I want to make sure that that they all kind of know that there's no tokenism, right? It's about the right people for the job and spending the time to find the people that are underrepresented, because guess what? If half your population is female, you better have half your executive staff be female. If you're not, then what are you doing, right? Who are you representing? Who are you building your products for? Who is your voice for, right? If it's like, it's just,
But this goes back to also marketing. This is why you understand the value of marketing. You understand, and what you were talking about, you were talking about storytelling beforehand. You're talking about, okay, if we can talk from the PR guy, right, the head of communications, and he gave you that email saying, hey, more than 60% of this list is for Connect. Let's lead the story in this way, and then everything else, we're bringing attention, and this is the front door, kind of thing. It's almost like the bouncer. And then once you come in, welcome to the party. Come on in. We got products and services that you may have not heard about, but now you have.
Yeah, and by God,
and then
we know
it just
you want
compounds. Craig, oh my gosh, thank you so much for spending this time together with me and everyone else to understand your story, hear it straight from you. I want to wrap up with this one question, because I think it deserves it at this rate. You have been with so many people. You have seen so many people. And, the best part of this whole line of work that we do is people, and the worst part is the people part too. But, as time has told, you've been able to really, really be able to master that. And that's a very amazing skill to have. Now, one thing my business mentor has taught me is that to identify people who are in leadership, they're really great. A great leader is at home and in business. So, and everything that I have learned about you, not just from the professional side about it, but also from the home side of it. I mean, it is incredible how I have seen you go through partnership, how you have done everything. I mean, even the stories I've heard from your wife on, you guys had a bearded dragon at your guys' startup office.
Oh, I forgot. Yes, Leonard. His name was Leonard. Oh
Leonard was getting crickets, and she thought you guys got a new car, and she put the crickets kept in the car overnight, kind of thing, and
they ate through the plastic. Yes,
ate through all the plastic, and she with a flashlight and find every single cricket.
Yeah, there were
basically
hundreds of crickets loose in her car. Yes.
But the point of that story was she knew that wasn't a high emergency situation to talk to you about, in a way. And so she understood you guys had an incredible agreement on how to work through, because you guys had figured it out along the way. And so, figure out how to communicate, how to be in sync, how to move forward in the speed of light that you didn't even know what was coming. And you guys had to adapt to it. You had startup babies. You had a real startup baby, and then you had real startup. Like, there was a lot of startup babies happening.
Yeah, a lot of stuff went on in 2004.
So what is the greatest thing that you felt was truly in the communication line that you had with your wife that had no idea what was going on as well, but she said, let's fucking go? What's the number one thing that you're so thankful about during that time and to getting to this point that you felt has been?
It's an interesting question. So,
because she was a direct influence.
Yeah, absolutely. My wife is a huge influence on me. We've been together 26 and a half years. It's a long time, right? And and that's a lot of life. And so I'd say that, much like, when I'm a very different human from a leadership point of view and a capability point of view than I was like in 1990 when I first joined Wacom and left grad school versus now. I'm a very different husband and father than I was 26 years ago. There's certainly been bumps along the way. It's like when you play like I do at the company business kind of career point of view, it's hard on any spouse, right? I think our trick was a couple of tricks. One was to always set aside time. So we have dedicated time every week. We've had it since we first had kids. We realized we needed date night because it was harder. And so that was 22 years of date night now at this point. And the only time we've missed a date night is when somebody's sick or someone's traveling, right? Typically me, most recently stuck on planes to India.
You had a shared calendar though that allowed for what is happening.
It was a point in time. We always, and the other thing that we do is we always come together at the end of the day, regardless of the day, and just spend time. Literally, it's that time being together. There's something about that kind of relationship where it's the biggest investment in a relationship and the most important investment in a relationship you'll ever make. It's like the training ground for every other relationship in business because they see you at your worst and your best and your worst. Did I mention the worst? In a way that others don't, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's been this willingness, much like I'm just willing to do whatever it takes, right? I've been willing to do whatever it takes to make the relationship work because we've definitely had times when communication was not our strong suit. We've definitely had times that were hard. But through all of it, there's been love, right? Which makes all the difference. And through all of it, there's been a desire to make it work. And so, what we got better and better at, I mean, we start in our kind of formative times, like one of the things in the day before text messaging was like easy, and when I was at my startup, my wife and I built a protocol in, for example, that if she rang, hung up, and rang again, that's how I would know it was important. And if that happened, I would always step out, just as an agreement, right? There was like, if I get the red phone, right? Kind of like in the White House, if I get the red phone call, I'm stepping up. Doesn't matter what, right? And having these, building in mechanisms so that kind of letting her know that it's like if she has something important, it's important to me too. I think that's important in all relationships, but it's not. Hasn't been. There's no place where it's more important. I think everything about. And it's interesting, right? What's been hard for me is I'm actually particularly good if there's less emotional investment, which is true basically if it's not family, you have different levels of emotional investment. It's funny, the place where we have the most emotional investment, it's actually often the hardest to, I've had to learn, and I've been coached by people I've worked with to figure out how to bring the stuff I can do at work home, right? That ability to listen, that ability to empathize, right? And it's interesting because it's harder when there's like these big emotions and all this history. I think we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. I mean, the thing about her in particular is she has been, and I just got lucky, right? Sometimes you get lucky. I'm just lucky that she has just been willing to, she saw something in me, always saw something in me, always believed in me, that no matter what, right? And if I was to pick the number one reason we're still going strong, it's that. I think she believed in us even when I didn't, right? And so, and I've just learned, to, being willing to see what's real, being willing to hear honesty, being willing to see the other point of view, right? Bringing that to my marriage is what's helped strengthen it so much at this point, right? is to have the empathy for what it's like for her, right? Part of it's, having empathy for what it's like. And if I had my best teacher about what it's like to be a woman has been my wife. What life is like for a woman in this culture, right? I learn a lot from her, right? She's an artist, so creative, very different creative, but it's all the same. We see through lines between what we do all the time, even though it's radically different, right? From a touch, how it manifests in the world, inside, how it works on the inside is so similar, right? Creativity is creativity, regardless of how it comes out through your hands and through your voice. It's kind of very similar, and so that's been, I think, the through line. People will often go, "Well, how can an artist and a nerd, what do they have in common?" And the answer is everything, because it's all creative, right? Going back to what I thought, doing code brought me all along. It's like I realized I was secretly tapping into creativity and didn't know it. I think having that kind of connection, right? Having built a life together, all those things, I just know that I wouldn't have been able to do what I've done, and I couldn't keep doing what I'm doing without that. So, if there was ever a relationship to invest in, to the younger founders out there who have one, it's that partnership that you have with your spouse or your significant other, or whatever you want to, however you want to characterize it, right? That person can be your biggest advocate, your biggest sounding board, your kind of your safety net. And the other thing that's so important, right? How I do what I do is to have home be a safe place, right? Have home be a place where I just don't need, I can turn myself off and to not have to deal with all the stuff that goes into the various roles I've had, because there are a lot, right? They are fun and exciting and exhausting, right? And so my wife has created an environment where I can do all that, which is amazing, right? And for that, I'm super grateful.
Oh, Craig. I can't wait until she sees this.
Yeah, you might need to. It's been 2 hours. You might want to send her the end part.
Or just clip the end.
Just clip to the end. Save her some time.
Happy anniversary. Craig, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and everything, your experience. This has been amazing. Seriously, thank you so much, Craig.
My pleasure. Thank you, C.
All right, we will tap out here for next time.
All right.
Thank you.